All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Cassandra Lunch 18. Um, Today, we'll be going over connecting Cassandra to Kafka. And your host today will be Ryan Quey. I'll just go ahead and get us started with a couple announcements like we usually do. Normally, Rahul leads these lunches, but he had another engagement today, so he couldn't be with us. So I'll be your host today. I'm Akwi O'Hiri, usually in the background, mostly just monitoring these meetings. But I'll be taking the reins today. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I really appreciate your continued attendance, and we hope we can continue to deliver these great topics week in and week out. So as usual, we need help finding speakers and sponsors. Please feel free to reach out to myself. My email is right there, or Raul. His email is right there as well. We're always looking for people to come in. And you don't necessarily have to speak. You could sponsor as well. Normally, we have people that, when we used to have these Cassandra meetups in person, we'd have sponsors for location and pizza. But now that we're online, we find different routes. So if you want to get involved, please do reach out via email. Data community, as always, we like to build a diverse, strong community, inclusive community. We want people of all races, genders, sexual orientation, religion, all included. Everybody's welcome. We always continue to push that forward. What do we cover here? Usually we go over data stacks in Cassandra, as mentioned in the title of the lunch, the Cassandra Lunch. We do sprinkle a little bit of other topics in there, but as always, our focus here is always on Apache Cassandra. Usually we take this time to introduce ourselves if we have any new members. Chuba, this might be your first meeting if I'm not mistaken. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the team? Chupa says hello. Okay, let's go ahead and keep it pushing. So group rules for this meeting. If you have a question, ask it, but please try and be polite and courteous. Also, if you'd prefer to raise your hand and do that as well, you can do that as well. Ryan will probably find a time to stop and call on you and address those questions. If you'd rather ask your questions in the chat, please feel free to do so. I'm sure Ryan will be able to get to those when he has a break in the presentation. Couple updates. Thanks to our sponsors, Data Community DC, General Assembly, Data Society, Capital One, American University, Statistics.com, and District Data Labs. Are there any announcements from anybody on the call? Any jobs, meetups, hackathons, conferences, classes by any chance? Welcome, Chuba. I just saw your message. Glad to have you. Okay. All right. Events we have coming down the pipeline. DataStax has a weekly workshop that's always ongoing. We have this Cassandra Lunch every week, every Wednesday at noon. If this is your first time, or if you're watching this recording, please feel free to join us. Same time, same place. If you'd like more information, please feel free to reach out to me at akwi@anant.us. That's AKWI@anant.us. Some upcoming events we have here at Anant. We have a webinar on the intro to Ansible on September 15th. We have Spark and Cassandra for machine learning model deployment on September 16th, and then open source BI tools in Cassandra on September 17th. As always, you can find more information on these at anant.us/events. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And that's all I have in the way of updates. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our host today, Ryan Quey. So over to you, Ryan.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. I jumped off for a second. My computer just froze right when I'm supposed to jump in. So, okay, yeah, thanks for the introduction. And today I'm just going to be sharing a personal project that I was working on. And yeah, it particularly will focus on how it interacts with Kafka. Yeah, so just if you have questions throughout, I'd love to hear your feedback as well. If you see something that you think could be improved. I'm sure it could be. So it's definitely a learning project for me, but yeah, so I'll just kind of go through what I worked on and talk about some of the design implementations, and then where Cassandra and Kafka come together, and then how they contribute to the project. So share my screen here. I'm just gonna share everything. Okay. So yeah, I'll just kind of introduce the project first. Okay, so it's I'm here at the, here I can send this in the Slack or in the chat. Oops, don't want to do that. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so I'm just, this is the project that I'll be presenting on. It's the call it the Java podcast processor. It's just basically a tool for interacting with podcasts. So I'm taking advantage of the iTunes podcast API. It's just a free API. You don't have to sign up. You can queries and stuff. So it's pretty neat. And here's the basic architecture. I'm using several different tools: Airflow, Kafka, Spark, and Cassandra. And particularly I'm using Elassandra for integration with Elasticsearch. So how it works is, okay. So how it works is, it all kind of starts with here at Kafka. So what will happen is, either you can start a job using Airflow, or you can, just send a message manually to a Kafka topic. And that Kafka topic is basically just run a search query. And then it runs a search. I have different Java workers all running on Docker. And each of these Java workers are connected to Kafka, to different separate Kafka topics. So what happens is the first Airflow kicks it off, or you publish to the topic. Then it goes to the first Java worker, and then it runs a search for that search query, that search term. It publishes to another topic. It goes back. It takes that. It runs a search to the iTunes API, and then we kind of extract that the podcast from that. We extract all the episodes. So the iTunes API also returns the RSS feed. So it goes and grabs the RSS feed, parses all the episodes, and publishes everything throughout the whole thing to Cassandra. So we're publishing podcasts, we're publishing episodes, we're also publishing the search query itself, just to be able to gain some data about like how many podcasts are returned, how many episodes this query returned, that kind of thing. So what Kafka does is it's just kind of acting in the middle and allows everything to work together. For a project of this size, Kafka is overkill. I'm not running distributed system or anything locally, but it kind of, you see the idea of, it allows everything to work together seamlessly and flow together well, just keeping the data moving. So yeah, it publishes all to Elassandra, and then from Elassandra, which is Cassandra plus Elasticsearch, you can visualize data in Kibana because it's connected to Elasticsearch. You can connect Zeppelin or Spark to the Cassandra using a Spark connector, and then you can also serve data using Flask. So I'm using a Flask app which serves React, and that's you sitting at the browser. So it starts everything just with a Docker compose, and I already did that for you, so we're not going to watch everything download, but I have some other screenshots on my website here. Okay, so I'm just going to minimize this. So basically, yeah, there's the architecture. I have some Zeppelin notebooks. If you wanted to look, it's in a separate repo. And there's also the Airflow DAGs, but yeah, so you can, there's various Zeppelin notebooks to integrate with Spark, and here's just kind of a basic thing to see how many keywords, how many categories, or like the counts for categories across all the episodes that have been brought into Cassandra. So that's an example. And we also have the search kit. So, okay. Yeah, so why don't we kind of like look into it, dig into it a little bit. First, what I'll do is, yeah, just pull up my search kit here. So, okay, can you guys see the PuTTY terminal?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, good. Yeah, so, okay, I've got some things open. So how it's laid out is I just broke up the project into different directories, and the Java workers are all in here. So those Java consumers and publishers all live in here. Here's the Flask server. And in this directory, scripts, Kafka testers, I just have like it's a basic script that just runs Kafka. Okay, so basically what I can do is maybe here I will do, I will consume from the podcast consumer. Okay, and so what this will do is just consume whenever a podcast is found, it'll publish here. And let me just see what's wrong with that. And this one will do the episodes. Okay, so I already have some there, but I'll just kick it off by running a search term. So I'm basically just opening a producer, and a search, like a sample search, we could search for Cassandra, for example, and it produces to that topic. Then it's already running, it's going to the API, and the iTunes API, and grabbing all podcasts that return with the word Cassandra. So, and then here it's grabbing all the episodes. It's going to the RSS feed, parsing all the episodes. This is moving too fast to do anything, I'm just freezing it. So here's all the episode records, and it kind of I'm just breaking down the RSS feed basically. So yeah, the different Kafka topics, yeah, it just allows us to keep the data flowing, and then you can add other consumers and do other things too, besides just the basic parsing RSS feeds, you know, and running queries and that kind of thing. So here's the search kit, and search kit is possible because it's just search kit's basically just a tool for quickly being able to visualize your Elasticsearch data. So Elasticsearch has been integrated in this project with Cassandra via Elassandra, and Rahul has talked about that before several times, and just the benefits of that. But here, one benefit is you can just have a quick visualization. So let's see, some filters, you can see some filters, basically just searching the genre for different things. I'm not sure why there's so much health and fitness when we haven't searched for that, but maybe we'll do another search, like you know, big data, and we'll do like distributed systems and Kubernetes, and then let's see, we'll get other results here. Okay, yeah, it'll take a second for it to go through, but yeah, there's different languages. We see different languages that are possible. Unfortunately, it looks like they're returning different capitalizations, so that's something that probably it'd be worth changing, so that as we persist it, you know, all the capitalizations unified. And you also can query by how many episodes a podcast has. So that's the basic functionality of the podcast tool. Some reasons why, just talking about why I chose podcasts in the first place. Podcasts are a place where you can find influencers, you can like for example, for this tool, if I wanted to search for, people who are influencers in the Kafka community, I could take this data, I could run it through natural language processing, and could come out with who's being interviewed by these different podcasts, which, sometimes you'll get people who have small companies, which is also helpful. You can find out, who's using Kafka in a smaller company. Sometimes you'll find who are the people who are being influenced off, or who are being interviewed often, or who are people writing books. So yeah, even in an age where a lot of people are using video, podcasts are still very popular. Here's, for example, the Confluent podcast. I heard about this meetup through a podcast. Rule was interviewed by the DataStax podcast. They just had their final episode, I think like a week ago or something. But yeah, so that's kind of why podcasts are helpful. And yeah, are there any questions at this point, or any thoughts on way to do things differently or something like that? Chat again. Okay, yeah, and feel free, you can just unmute yourself and jump in too. So interaction is always welcome and makes for a better meetup. But I can just keep going a little bit. And one thing that came up was, when I'm ingesting data, I don't want to have repetition. So this is something that Kafka makes easy by doing something called an upsert, where it does either insert or updating based on whether a record's there already. So for me, what that meant was I needed to make sure that my primary keys were organized, were chosen well. It's that basic thing in Cassandra, which is always important, data modeling. So how I did my migrations is I just have them in a separate folder. Called migrations, go figure. And yeah, so as it's running a search, it'll persist data to this podcast table. Create table if not exists, podcast tool, podcast by language. I chose language as my partition key. Here's primary key language, and clustering column feed URL. So feed URL makes sure that the data is unique. Each podcast is going to have its own unique feed URL, or at least that's what I'm assuming, right? If it has the same URL, I'm assuming it's the same podcast. And then I wanted to use language as a primary key initially, because I figured, well, that way, if just kind of imagining if you're in a different country and you wanted to search by a certain language, then it makes it easy, and also that way it groups podcasts together so that the partitions aren't too big. If you wanted to have different clusters in different countries and sort by language, you could. Honestly, looking back, I probably should have picked a different primary key, but that's what I have. And yeah, ordering by feed URL is kind of useless, but it's a learning project. So. But what this meant was that I could run the same search, or it could find the same podcast multiple times, and it wouldn't keep on creating more and more podcast records for that same podcast, because there's a uniformity to the language and the URL. If a podcast was found again by a separate search, it would only create one record for that podcast. Okay, and so that's kind of something that I found to be important as I was building this tool. So, yeah, any questions at this point, or other thoughts? I can just kind of keep going through different parts of it. If not.
Hey Ryan, I have something, nothing like technical, but you may have mentioned this in the beginning, but what API are you connecting to find these podcasts? Is it like Apple, Spotify, or just something online?
Yeah, I'm using the iTunes API. So it's nice for a demo project or like a learning project, because especially if you're interested in podcasts, because it's totally open, totally free. They do put a I mean, like any API, there is a limit on how many times you can hit their API before they start throwing red flags. But yeah, so actually, something that's interesting that I found, this is kind of unrelated to your topic, but when I try to hit the iTunes API from my local machine, it pinged out much faster. They put the limit on me much faster and stopped me from continuing. When I ran the same queries from my AWS, I have a Cloud9. It's kind of like Gitpod, but it's AWS's cloud development environment. When I did it from AWS and ran API calls from AWS, it hardly ever pings out, which I guess they have something working where they, maybe one of you guys know better, but yeah, it hardly ever pings out or hits the quota. So yeah, I was using that's a long answer for your question. I was using the iTunes API. So it's, you know what, I'm not sure if I even have oh, you know what I do have? I have a script. This is the first thing I wrote. It's just like a test. Does the podcast API work? And here's the query that I run. It's basically just itunes.apple.com/search. And you can search for, you can search what media I wanted to podcasts. And then this is the term that I use. So term equals whatever, put a limit. You can even search for language, but yeah, that kind of stuff. So good question. Yeah, I guess I'll just quickly go over some of the other parts of the project. So I also have an Airflow part to the project, or piece in the platform. So there's some Airflow DAGs. Basically, it was pretty simple. I was just trying to play around with it, but what Airflow does is it allows you to automatically trigger something. So in this case, because it's more of a batch job, in that, you're not continually running queries, although you could set it up to continually run queries off of the iTunes API. But what this does is you can periodically run queries or do whatever you want to. It's especially helpful if you're going to run into quotas. So there's some Airflow, just put that here in case you're interested. Some Airflow DAGs. So you can see when it was running through October to the end of 2020, and then into to the end of 2019, and then into 2020. There's also some Zeppelin notebooks. I was hoping that it would show up nicely. I think the Jupyter Notebooks GitHub just displays for you, but it looks like I'd have to start up Zeppelin, so I'm not going to do that. But yeah, there's different Zeppelin notebooks as well. So Zeppelin's nice because it integrates easily with Spark. So that's why I went with Zeppelin and Cassandra. So yeah, okay. Any other thoughts or questions? If not, maybe we could probably just wrap it up early then. If no one has anything to add.
Okay, before we go again, I just want to thank everyone for joining. Please do keep an eye out. We'll have a blog post and the recording of this Cassandra Lunch up. If not by the end of business today, we'll definitely have it up by tomorrow. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to me directly at akwi@anant.us. And thanks again for coming. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Take care.